welcome to the School of Speech podcast, presented by SpeechTherapyPD.com. School of Speech is designed specifically for the school-based SLP to come together to discuss current topics, tackle difficult situations, and share our insights. Our goal is to bolster confidence, celebrate our triumphs, and foster a community dedicated to the excellence in the school setting. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Carolyn Dolby, and I am your Speech Therapy PD podcast host for School of Speech. School of Speech is designed for the school-based SLP to come together to explore current trends, share insights, and champion our expertise. Our goal is to bolster confidence, celebrate our triumphs, and really foster a community dedicated to the excellence in the school setting. I am so excited about today's episode. It is titled Leading the Way, School-Based SLPs as the Agents of Change. I love this. And we have Dr. Laura Mansfield here, and she will be leading our exploration of the dynamic role of the school-based SLP as we are leaders and agents of change. We'll be discovering how SLPs are at the forefront of fostering inclusive, communicative, and supportive educational settings. We're really going to learn what it takes to be transformative leaders in the field of speech-language pathology. Before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping. Each episode is 60 minutes and will be offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. Financial disclosures for Laura. She is the owner of the Joyful SLP. She is an SLP coach and district trainer. She is also receiving an honorarium from Speech Therapy PD for her participation in today's episode. Keep them coming. I see you're in there. I'm going to start getting to you in a minute. Laura has no non-financial disclosures. For me, financially, I do receive a salary at the district level as the dysphagia support clinician for Cy-Fair Independent School District. I'm also compensated for my graduate courses I teach at the University of Houston, and I'm a consultant for school districts across the nation supporting their program development and staff training. I also receive compensation from Speech Therapy PD for hosting School of Speech. Non-financial, I am a member of the Texas Speech and Hearing Feeding and Swallowing Task Force. I volunteer for Feeding Matters, and I'm a member of ASHA Special Interest Groups 13, Swallowing and Swallowing Disorders, and SIG 16, School-Based. Now, without any further ado, I am so excited to welcome Dr. Laura Mansfield. Hi, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Let me tell you guys a little bit about Laura. I'm so amazed she's coming. I love this. Okay. After she completed her bachelor's in healthcare administration, Laura realized that her true passion was serving children with disabilities. So she returned to school and received her master's in speech-language pathology in 2001. After working 12 years as an SLP in public, private, and clinical settings, she moved to special ed administration. Laura worked as a SPED admin for a private out-of-district school district for students with moderate to severe disabilities for 3 years, and then in various administrative roles in the public school setting for another 7. She completed a dissertation on mobile technology as augmentative and alternative communication on her journey to achieving a doctoral degree in educational leadership. Now, reflecting on her goals, passions, and her career path, and during COVID-19, it really caused her to take a step back, and she came back to her SLP roots. She currently works as an SLP in an elementary school, servicing students grades 1 through 5. She's passionate about her administrative, legal, and leadership experiences to empower SLPs across settings to really see themselves as leaders that they are. So welcome, Laura. We are blessed. So excited. I want to start with a feel good. Let's start with your passion. I love that. And I'm going to take a look in the chat and let's see where oh, wow. No, we've got lots of people here today. I'm going in. Oh. Joyce. Hi, Joyce. 10 years in. She says collabs of frustration. Joanne, 10 years in paperwork. Jackie, 3 years in. Oh, I like this one. Teachers not getting any idea of RTI. Abigail, nice to see you. 3 years in, her biggest frustration has been keeping older students engaged in settings. Hi, Lori, 20 plus years. She has no frustration. She might turn back one. Mata, oh, she's only worked in clinics and you're switching to schools next month. No frustrations yet. She has a feeling that waking up super early and the amount of paperwork will be frustrating. Yeah. Kelsey, she's been school-based teletherapist for 2 years. Being a teletherapist, I think the frustration between herself and the brick and mortar school, because you live 1,700 miles from your school. That's crazy. Yeah, I could see there would be a disconnect there. Hi, Lisa, 25 years in, paperwork. Elaine, 30 years, you veteran. But now she's in telepractice, but it used to be caseload. Here's another 2 years. It's keeping them engaged during teletherapy. Amy, 11 to 12, paperwork and scheduling. Justine, currently inactive, but taking courses. Well, I'm so glad you're here. Elaine, she just returned too. She was a SPED admin. Oh, you guys have something in common. Hi, Olivia, 2 years in paperwork. And Lori, frustration. Listen, inappropriate referrals, right? Despite teacher training. All right. Thank you for that. So we know you're in it to win it. We've got some frustrations. So we're gonna talk about that. Dr. Mansfield is here to help us out, but she's gonna start feel good with her passion.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for commenting. It's great to see where everyone's at. Having been an SLP right out of school, having the admin experience, and then seeing my fellow colleagues in schools, online and in the groups that I'm on, talking about feeling so much burnout. And I think COVID and the pressure that was put on us as therapists to pivot so quickly, meet all the needs of our students, despite trying to figure out teletherapy if we've maybe never even done that before, I think added to the burnout. And I think everyone in schools is very overwhelmed right now. And I'm just really passionate about helping SLPs simplify what they do and having a simple framework of understanding of what their role is in the school so that they can have joy. I think we've invested so much money, so much time. We're caring, compassionate human beings who want to help our students. And I think we feel like everything else gets in the way of our ability to do that. And then we don't feel effective. And then we get burned out even more. And we just want to leave. We want something else. And so my goal is to help SLPs empower them to be as effective as possible with as simple systems as possible so they can feel effective again. And if they decide to leave the profession, at least they're not leaving because they feel like they just can't do it anymore. That's just a horrible feeling no matter where you're at.
Agreed. And you kind of touched on when you said SLPs to know the role in the educational setting. Do you want to get us going talking about the difference between clinical and educational settings?
I would love to. I think
Yeah.
one of the most powerful things that we can kind of wrap our brains around is that we are healthcare professionals in an educational setting. And because of that, we have to really fully understand what that educational model is and our role in the educational setting as a clinician. So that framework, I think we know, but I think we miss it a lot of times where sometimes we're not as focused on what specific skill is that student missing that we need to bridge as a therapist that child's access to that skill in their educational setting. And are we the one that needs to provide that service? I think in schools, it's especially hard. Like I remember when I was a young clinician thinking, I should have been an OT. It's so much easier, right? Like the lines are pretty clear for an occupational therapist of what they do and what they don't. But in a school, what's not language? And I felt really confused by that initially. Like, what am I supposed to work on? And what's the special education teacher supposed to do? What's the gen ed teacher's role? What's my role? And I think having been an administrator and having the time that I've had, and now coming back into the role, I have much more clarity on, what is that federal law? What is that framework? And I think sometimes too, as a clinician and someone who wants to do what you're being told to do, you have administrators or other people telling you this is the reg. And I
Mhm.
know as an SLP, I didn't really understand my state regs. I didn't really understand the federal law. It wasn't until I was an administrator and I needed to run the meeting and know the law that I read the law. So I think like that's one thing that we can do is, clear is kind. I think Brene Brown says that. And I
Mhm.
think we have to have clarity for ourselves so that we can also provide that clarity to the staff that we work with, to sometimes our administrators, and the other people at the district. I know it can be hard in schools because you have a special ed administrator and you have a principal, and you sometimes have multiple different levels of teachers that you're working with. And sometimes you're the only one that does what you do. And
Mhm.
so that can also be isolating. So having that clarity, I think, is really important.
I love it. I think that's important when you're saying know the law. And I think that might be one of those missing pieces that we might have. But more clear is kind.
Clear is
Clear is
kind.
kind.
Clear is kind for us, and clear is kind for our students, our families, and the teachers that we work with.
Absolutely. So I think maybe let's clear up our role when we talk about being a related service provider.
Yes.
Yeah.
Related service. That means my service is related to. So if I can't answer the question, what am I doing? How is this service related to? Either and again, so sometimes we will qualify in isolation. So we
Mhm.
just look at the self score. We just look at the TIL score. We just look at, the PPVT and the EVT. We have our standard battery. And we look at that battery and we say, oh, 1.5 standard deviations below. And depending on your state will depend on how the state says yes or no, this child may qualify. But we don't ever do that in schools in isolation from a team. Everything that we do is related through the team. So even though I find a weakness, doesn't necessarily mean that child needs my service.
Mm.
I have to be at a team meeting where I'm having a conversation of what is this child's overall profile and what is their performance either in the classroom, either with the curriculum or social emotionally, right? So we look at the whole child. It's not just academics, but that can be a part of it. I think it's clear when it's a child with stuttering disorder, articulation, apraxia, like that's what we do. There's nobody else in the school that does that. I think it gets a little bit fuzzier for us sometimes when it's more of the literacy language skills, because all those literacy skills are language-based skills. And so sometimes it can get fuzzy. When I identify a disability or a weakness in a specific area, just because the child has that deficit doesn't necessarily mean I'm the best person on the team to address that deficit.
I think
And
that's
that
something.
takes close collaboration with my team.
Right. We need to hear that we might not be the provider, the right provider. Um,
Correct. If that child needs that skill in context and there's a special educator on the team who has the skill set to provide that instruction, then
mhm.
that might be better for that child. And we are also, all states fall under the federal regulation of least restrictive environment. So if I'm taking that student out of context, how am I making what I'm doing related? I should always be thinking about how is what I'm doing related to what they're doing in the classroom. So I'm a big proponent of a 3-1 model, writing monthly minutes, getting in classrooms. I think that's the most efficient way to make sure what I'm doing is related and to think more flexibly about service. I don't know. I think it's carryover from the medical model that seems like everyone gets a 2 times 30. I think we've done
Right.
better since, I mean, I was an SLP from 2001. So I think back then it was more standard. Everybody kind of got 2 times 30. It wasn't very individualized. I think we're better at that now overall, but I still think we get stuck in these ruts of service provision. And we do have multiple models. We can do consultation, we can push in, and we can pull out.
Exactly. I find that sometimes we feel like we want everything to fit in a box. So we want to see everybody in a certain increment. And so, yeah, if we give everybody 2 times 30, then I can schedule it just like that and it all looks nice and pretty. But again, IEP, individualized it's not
Yeah, it's
individualized.
individualized.
Is if everybody is getting the exact same minutes and the same service delivery.
And I think sometimes we get stuck on how to talk to families and parents and educate our fellow staff members about what we do and why we do what we do. Because I don't know if we have clarity all the time on why we're doing what we're doing and how it relates. I think that's the most important part, and being able to say to parents, it's really important that this child with a language-based learning disability understands how what I'm doing with them relates to what they need to do in the classroom. And so in order to make sure I achieve that, these are the services that I'm going to be able to, provide. And I need to link with the classroom and be that bridge for that skill.
Kelsey, thanks for jumping in. She's agreeing. She thinks that something that complicates scheduling, yes, but it's so important that kiddos have individualized minutes. It's true.
Yeah.
Especially, not only should individual education plan, yeah, individualized, but also least restrictive environment that you touched on. And that's part of knowing the law that the child has the right to be in the least restrictive environment with their peers as much as possible.
Yeah. And Kelsey, I really appreciate your point, because I know for me, like, scheduling used to be such a stressful
Yeah.
event, and I hated scheduling. And I have come up with systems that really help me with scheduling. I hold a scheduling party, I invite all the teachers to my room, and I know everyone's in a different environment, so that might not work for everyone. But I do, even though I'm individualizing, I still have a general idea of what's going to work best for that type of disability. So if I have a child who has more significant articulation issues, I prefer for myself, I can be more effective working with that child one-on-one for short spurts of 5 to 7 minutes ish, 2, 3, 4 times a week. And so I have broken out in my schedule time that I do that. And I have a little kitchen cart that my husband helped me retrofit with wheels. And I pull it around in the hallways, and I have my kids, and I just cycle through my kids real quick. I use an abacus. I get 100 trials or more. I use the principles of motor learning for most of my students. And that system of addressing those needs fits within my schedule in a nice way. So even though I am always individualizing, because I'm thinking, does this child have one sound, so I'm doing once a week? Or does this child need 2, 3, or 4 times a week, depending on the intensity and their need? I'm still kind of within a framework. So I have a framework, but I'm individualizing within it. I hope that makes sense. That streamlines my scheduling.
Sure. I like the idea that you have a cart on wheels that you take. And I just heard you use an abacus. I love that.
The kids love the abacus because they're very competition
Tactile.
based.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Right. So they know that that's the goal, is to get 100 trials within
Mhm.
that certain amount of minutes. And so it motivates them. It's quick. The teachers love it. I don't have the kids out for a really long time. And it allows me, to touch base, even because I'm in the hallway. So I can touch base with teachers easier. This is the sound. This is what they're working on. This is what I'd like you to cue them with in the classroom. So it's been really efficient for me.
Right.
And effective for the kids.
Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, but what made me think about it, also it makes you visible in the school. You're not just
Yes, that's so
away
important.
in your little hobbit hole.
Yeah, when I took over the caseload 3 years ago, there was no push-in minutes, and everything was in the therapy room. And so I shifted my schedule so that I followed a 3-1 model, which most people are familiar with. So in general, for most students, I wrote all my minutes monthly. So 20-minute or 30-minute blocks, depending on the skill, 3 times 20 a month, or 3 times 30 a month, or 6 times 30 a month. And again, this is my framework, and I can flex it depending on the child.
Mm-hmm.
And then once a week in that month is my push-in week. And so I would write those minutes in the A grid or in the consult grid, depending on your state and how you write your minutes. And that would allow me to be in the classroom, which was invaluable to make my services related. I not only got to see the language the teacher was using with the child, or some little strategy that they were using to get the students to respond, I could see what they were expecting. I think because I work with only students with disabilities, it's easy to forget the level that my students are expected to perform when I'm not with them. And I realized there was a gap between what I was asking them to do and what they're expected to do in the classroom. And I needed to provide them skills and strategies to close the gap in their classroom and keep meeting that goal for them. And if I'm never in the classroom, how do I know? I never knew. And then I'm in the classroom, I'm hearing, the teachers see me as someone who's a support, definitely developed better relationships overall. There's always that teacher or couple of teachers who don't understand why you're there or don't want you to observe them or don't really understand. And so those were my special teachers of, touches of conversations and just keeping things open, helping them know that I was just there to support them, to support their students, because I know that's their goal too, is they want their students to be successful. I want that too. How can I support you in doing that? Was definitely the way that I came in. I think that's a skill in and of itself for us as speech language pathologists to remember that, teachers might react to us, but it's probably not about us. And that's a whole skill set in and of itself.
Sure. Yeah. And that's that whole collaboration.
Yeah, it's so
We are a
important.
related service.
Yes. Yeah, I think a lot of times we try and make school therapeutic setting
Right.
i-
Yeah.
instead of make our service related to the educational setting. It's a slight shift in thinking, but I think if you make that shift, it makes a huge difference.
And I think it really educating everybody on what our role is in the school. I remember I was in an IEP last fall or last spring, and a parent said, "Well, how many minutes have they been allotted? Like in a medical setting, like, and how much is insurance?" Right? So
Covering.
their thought is, I
Yes.
want everything that the insurance is going to do. It was, yeah, we had to reframe, to take a minute and kind of talk about how it is different. And I think
Yes.
Joanne is jumping in saying she thinks it's hard for parents to also, and yes, exactly. It is hard for them to understand because we all want what's best for their students, for their
Mhm.
children. But I think understanding, and I think the way, Laura, you said that we are a related service, meaning our services need to be related to the classroom, to the education.
Yes. Yeah, and that could be their curriculum, or it could be social skills. It could be
Mhm.
recess and lunch and those types of things. And I agree with you, Joanne. I do think it is important for us to practice and to have a little script that we're comfortable with so that we can explain when a child qualifies, the goal of our service, why we're providing it, and that the ultimate goal is that they won't need us anymore.
Mhm.
I think we do parents a disservice when we don't have that conversation at the initial qualifying meeting. So this is my role in the school. This is how I'm different educationally from a medical clinical model. We have the same training. I have the same master's degree, but their criteria is activities of daily living, quality of life, insurance coverage.
Mhm.
My criteria is, does the child require my service to access special education or general education services? This is my role. This is how I'm going to bridge that gap to these skills that maybe the special ed teacher is working on. And sometimes a special ed teacher, say, might work on comprehension in the second grade classroom. But my child doesn't really understand the difference between where, when, and why. I might focus on where, when, and why because I know they're not doing that in the classroom in the way that my child needs to be able to answer comprehension questions. But I'm connecting what I'm doing to a book and I'm doing, literacy-based therapy that's contextualized and teaching them with visuals that then the teacher can use in the classroom when they're asking comprehension questions related to books in the classroom. And once they have that skill, my goal is to pull back and maybe do consult services now that they have that skill. So I think it's important to think that through and be able to explain it to parents and staff. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah, I like that because, right. Oh, Elaine just jumped in. She says, I agree. I talk about goal of moving out of speech from the initial IEP and talk about it at each annual review. That's perfect. And that's a great way to just remember to do that at every single meeting and how they're doing in the big picture. Because, right, we want them to not need us. The goal
We
is to
do,
get them
yeah.
out.
It
Otherwise, we have
is, right?
everybody in speech. If the goal was everyone to have speech, we just take all of them. But that's not our role. I think
Right.
we
And I
have,
think sometimes maybe we do overqualify students. I mean, every
mm,
student in the school would benefit from the skill sets that we have. It's just a
absolutely.
fact. They all would. And sometimes it's hard to draw that line for students where you feel like, but I could help them. Because that's what we do. We're caring, people. But then I think it impacts our ability to be effective with the students who really require our services. It wouldn't just benefit from them.
Exactly. That's when we're talking about we're frustrated with how large our caseloads are. Well, we need to take a minute and look at those caseloads and really think about the three prongs of our qualifications. Is there a disability, right? And do they need specialized instruction?
Are they making
And
effective progress in the classroom?
right. Do they need to make effective progress in the classroom? And third, are the skills of an SLP the one that is needed? Because they still might
Correct.
need the help, but they don't
Yes.
need, but they're receiving other supports. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it does get a little hard when they're only qualifying for speech. They're provided special education under the umbrella of speech. That does get a little, but I think if we follow Elaine's advice, even if they're coming under just speech, that at the very initial IEP, we're saying our goal is to get them in, get them out. And then at each,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you,
I think
Elaine.
a lot of times too, the speech onlys tend
Yeah,
to be
I hate that.
your younger children a lot of the times. And so it's important to have conversations at those meetings about how sometimes, this is a developmental delay
Hmm.
and that the child can outgrow these skills and that would be the goal. But sometimes it can also be a precursor to other things. And so we have to be good advocates for students if we see red flags for reading disabilities or comprehension disabilities, because if they do have a true language based disability, it is going to impact them academically. And depending on the state that you're in, sometimes a school district might not have done a psychoeducational evaluation, and that child really requires that in order to make sure that they get the academic supports that they needed, with a special educator.
100%, which leads us right into leadership and being an SLP and being a leadership. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think I used to think that leadership was my title. And I definitely have found that leadership is we lead no matter where we are in a school. And I really feel like speech language pathologists have a unique opportunity to be leaders and agents of change in their schools by we touch so many people in a school. In the school that I'm in, I'm the only SLP. I work with grades 1 through 5. I work with multiple teachers in each grade. I work with, we call them ESPs, the educational support personnel. I work with the occupational therapist, the physical therapist, the school psychologist, the school adjustment counselor. I have a lot of ability to impact those relationships across a school. I
Mhm.
really do. And I can, I've definitely not done it well in the past for sure. And I've learned a lot along the way on how to build those relationships and advocate for change in my building. Like my building was using more of a whole language balanced literacy approach.
Mhm.
And through advocacy, we got them to bring in more of a structured literacy approach. And that I think is because of relationships that I developed across the school and insight that I could bring to the table. I think leaders, it depends on, I guess, your definition of leader. I
Mhm.
like servant leader, but we have to
Yes.
lead ourselves first and we lead our students and we can lead change in our schools and we can provide leadership to teachers and our administrators. I've had administrators say to me that us SLPs make them nervous or they're afraid of us because they don't really understand what we do. And I think that's the
Oh.
case a lot of the time. But it took me being an administrator to go into my principal and say, what are your initiatives in the school that I can support you with? What are your biggest goals this year? That's leadership. That's listening first and trying to understand the system. We're in this big umbrella educational system, but then we're in our school, which is a system within the larger umbrella. So how does this school work? What are the goals of my administrator? What are the goals of that teacher that I want to work with? What are the goals of the parent for the child? What goals do we have? How does my student understand their goals? All of those skills, take leadership.
Agreed. Kelsey agrees. Thanks, Kelsey Burge out there. She also thinks, SLPs, we are leaders, not only in the school. She's saying SLPs are leaders in the hospital setting and in SNFs, everywhere that she's worked. She's been a leader, and in the schools as well. And I think that's true. An SLP is full stop an SLP, whether we work in whatever setting we are, and we are the leader. But I love when we're really talking about what we need to do in the educational setting, that yes, we are trained to be leaders, should be trained to be leaders, but I think we're here to get more insight on what's the potential for us to become that leader.
Yeah. And I'm listening to, and I'm thinking, I don't want any SLP to listen to this and think there's more things that I have to do, right? And feel overwhelmed. I just want to empower SLPs to think about, how we do what we do is sometimes more important than what we do. We have an opportunity to support. We are trained communicators. We're communication experts. And yet sometimes I feel like we fall short with communicating with other adults or being able to navigate hard conversations with teachers or come alongside people in a school setting. And we can get really frustrated. And sometimes how we communicate our needs, that frustration comes out, and then we can't be heard. So I think there's a whole set of skills underneath what we do to help us figure out how to do it in a way that helps us be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not always successful. I've worked for really difficult administrators where as much as it depended on me, I did everything I could, and they just didn't get it and they didn't understand. And sometimes you do have to walk away, if you're in that kind of environment. But I hope, and in my career, those have been less frequent than people who really just wanted what was best for kids. And we're open to having conversations about this really isn't working and this is why. But I had to have clarity on why it wasn't working
Mm-hmm.
and what I thought could solve the problem, because I'm the only one. Like, especially most of the administrators I worked with were teachers and aren't clinicians. Like, we are clinicians. We have a different clinical understanding of the skills that we're looking at for our students. And so we have to understand the educational system and what might work to help us best provide those clinical services within the school. And that takes leadership skills.
Right. Leadership or agents of change.
Yes, exactly. Agency. I love that word agency, that we feel ownership and agency, and not in a way that, again, is, I don't know. Unfortunately, when I sat as an administrators a lot of times would be frustrated with the SLPs. They're always asking for things. Like, these are things that I heard as an administrator. And it always broke my heart because I knew the heart of the person asking. But with an administrative team who feels frustrated and overwhelmed, and they don't really know how to help us because they haven't done, like, we know sometimes it's hard to remember that not everyone knows what we know. Have you ever felt that way? Like you're like, what? You don't know that? Doesn't everybody know that? That seems weird. So instead of assuming they know, I just assume they have I assume good intentions, and I assume just a misunderstanding. They just don't understand until I'm proven otherwise. So we have that conversation and I ask the questions like, why are we doing it that way? Can you help me understand? Can I offer a solution to this problem and come with that, solution-oriented mindset?
I love what
and
you
not
just
taking
said
it personally.
when you said assume they're coming from good intentions. I think that is powerful. If we come from that positive, okay, they're coming from a good intention. So I need to know, I need clarity, because being clear is kind.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, I think, like you said, we need to understand what the situation is before we can, so we know how to help and and get what we need understood. Sure.
Yeah, and sometimes we can be so frustrated, we could just be like, my caseload's too high, like fix it. As opposed to this is my perception of what's happening in this setting with these students. And here's a potential solution I have, and this is why I think it works.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how it meets all of your regulatory requirements because I've asked the questions. I think that approach, hopefully, can help. And sometimes it's just starting those ongoing conversations and getting those conversations going. It wasn't until I was an administrator that it even occurred to me to look at what every district has a district improvement plan. They
Mm-hmm.
have goals of where they're trying to move a district. And schools have those too. And principals spend a lot of time on that. And it never occurred to me to ask. It never occurred to me to ask my teachers, did they understand my role? Was there anything I was doing that was limiting our ability to communicate? So every school year, I send out an email using Google Forms with some basic questions. Is there anything you want me to know? Is there anything I can do better? For new teachers, do you understand the role of an SLP in the classroom? Is there anything I can do to clarify that? Those kinds of questions to really survey the staff that I'm going to work with so I know kind of where I'm starting from. Like we did today. Where are we starting from? What's
Right.
our, what are you frustrated about? What's working for you? How long have you been doing this? Just so you understand your audience a little bit better. I think, seeking first to understand before being understood. That's Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I love that book.
Mm.
And I think that piece of seeking first to understand is something that we can do really well because we're clinicians. We're so good at asking questions and getting to the bottom of things. We're diagnosticians. We're problem solvers. I mean, we solve problems all day long. We, differentiate for our kids. We're flexible. We're creative. We're our best therapy tool always. And so I think we can come up with these forward thinking out of the box that still falls within the regulation, allows us to better hone in on the skills our kids need, be more effective, which I think helps us feel better about our work, and then be that positive, culture shifter in the school because we have so many touches across a building.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, touching on caseload, I think most
Yes.
of us are going to say, I'm super frustrated with how high my caseload is. And I think you gave us some great things to think about. Think about your service delivery model. Think about, is everybody 230 or everybody 150 or whatever it is? Is everybody in that cookie cutter? That would be exhausting. You couldn't get everybody in, and
It
really
is.
looking at the dose and frequency for what not every child needs that same dose and frequency.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, we do have a lot of research on more of that speech model
Mm-hmm.
for effectiveness, but there is some new research around even things like grammar, where researchers have done more short, 15-minute, twice a week or something, that kind of shorter, targeted. So I'm all for trying things. And I always tell parents, my goal is to meet this goal for your child to make this growth. And if what I'm doing is not working, I'll let you know. We have amendments, like we can change things. And so, building that trusting relationship with your family so that they know too that if it's not working, we'll change it. I think that's really helpful as well. But, caseload numbers, I think if you are qualifying children in isolation outside of what the teacher is seeing, what they're doing in the classroom, that's a really priority shift that you could make this next school year. Are you surveying teachers? Do they fill out something for you? Do you have a sense of what their skill set is in the classroom? And once you get standardized scores, do you have a sense of how that's impacting them in the classroom? Because and this is the federal law, even if they have a disability, if they're still making effective progress in the classroom, they don't qualify. That's the next question.
Wait, say that louder for the ones in the back.
You can have a disability and still not get IEP services. Just because you have a disability does not mean you qualify. So we have to be able to explain how the disability impacts progress and why they need our service to make effective progress. And it might not always be us. I have identified disabilities and weaknesses, deficits in students. And as a team, we decided the best person to work on that was a special ed teacher. I might have a consult with that special ed teacher, but that doesn't mean they need me to work on that skill.
And depending on the skill, would the skill be taking them away from learning it in the classroom in the context that it should be?
Yes, how often?
Yeah.
Sorry, but like, how often do we forget that these are real human beings?
Yes.
Like, these are children who sometimes have such messy schedules. They're bouncing in and out. They're working with multiple different people who are using multiple different supports with all different strategies, and they have a disability. And we wonder why they're not like, and they don't, sometimes the teachers don't go year to year using the same strategy, and then they have to learn a new strategy. But, I like to keep that child in the middle of the conversation with parents as well. Like, I understand, that you want your child to have all that more. However, all that more means missing, they might miss math or miss their reading group or miss, whatever it is that's happening in the classroom. And that doesn't allow continuity for your child to learn this curriculum area. And that's important too. So we have to balance those things. We only have so much time. And yes, I want to address the skill, but I honestly can't address that skill in 15 minutes. I can, because that's the thing I'm honing in on. Sometimes I think we also try and do too many broad things. And so when you're trying to do too much, it's hard to fit it all in. So honing in on what's my role, what's my responsibility, what skill am I teaching?
I like that. Right. Because we could, I mean, it might not be queso, but it might be how many goals do you have for every student? And I think we really need to really think about, we don't need to have 15 goals. The
No.
student might have a lot of deficit. Absolutely. I'm not saying that they might not have weaknesses, but looking at what is the biggest impact your service would be relating to what they need in the classroom.
Yes. And which ones are most important to measure? Because
Okay.
just because it's not on the IEP doesn't mean we can't work on it,
Sure.
right? We work on skills all the time that we're not measuring. But what are we going to measure to show the progress in that deficit area? And writing, because sometimes I've gotten IEPs in where it's like one objective, but there's actually four objectives in the one objectives. Like they're working on plurals plus irregulars plus, I don't know, ing endings
Right.
plus, and it's all in one objective. I'm like, oh my goodness. Like I take data on these, that's like four different goals for me. So yeah, which one am I going to measure to show the progress that the student needs to have the access to the whatever that curriculum based or social emotional skill is?
So I think what I'm hearing, and I love this, is that when you are deciding on the goals, and this ties into getting the buy-in from the parents of understanding, your time, and the reason why you're doing this time is you're choosing these goals that are going to have the biggest impact. And those are the goals you're going to measure, but and being able to say to the parent, because we're working on this goal, all these other objectives will come into play. We're just not, they all support this main goal that we're working on.
Yeah, especially in the schools because you write them for a year.
Yes.
I'm thinking about where do I want to get them in the year, but there's like steps along the way, always. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Where do we go next? How do we advocate? How do we get to become agents of change?
Oh, that's such a big
I
question.
know
And
that
it's
was a big
so
ask.
hard. It's so hard because everyone's in their own setting with their own unique players, right?
Yeah.
Unique systems, unique I'm not sure where everyone is across the country, but every state has a little bit of a nuance difference sometimes. But I think one of the first things we can do is be really honest with ourselves. Like, where am I? Where am I on my own clarity of what my role is in the school? Where am I with my relationships with the people that I work with? Where am I with my administrators and in my relationships with them? Do I feel like I am a clinician working well within an educational framework, or am I trying to make that framework clinical? I think all those things are places that we can just kind of reflect without judgment, please. I
Yeah.
think we need to be really gentle with ourselves. There's no judgment here. It's just allowing ourselves to ask the questions and hold the answer and be okay with wherever the answer is, knowing that we will figure it out because we always do. That's what we do. We're clinicians or SLPs. We always figure it out. So I think, good, non-judgmental, curious, just being curious, not judgmental. That's Ted Lasso, one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Love Ted Lasso.
that's like my favorite line from the whole show. Be curious, not judgmental. I have to tell myself that a lot, all the time, because I could be hard on myself. How well do I know the law? Am I depending on other people to tell me what the regs are? Or have I actually read them? I'm not going to lie to you. They're not all that fun and exciting to read. However, you really should get on your state website, read your state regs, understand them. And if you're being told to do something that you don't think matches, figure out who to ask and how to ask in a way that gets you the clarity you need. That's not how I read that. Why are you interpreting it that way? And again, not in a like gotcha kind of way, but I just really want to understand, because when I read this is how I'm interpreting it. And I think that this is within the law. Or sometimes there's case law that administrators know, or there was a hearing in their district, and so they changed a policy that doesn't seem to quite line up with the law. But I want to know that. I want to know how we got here so that I can operate under, what they're saying, but I can also kind of, in the places that I need to push back for clarity, that maybe it doesn't have to be that way, that I understand what those spaces are. And then I think we can also be really good listeners. I mean, we listen diagnostically so well. Are we also listening to who we serve? Do we know what's most important to our administrators? Have we asked our teachers, if we have provided clarity with our role? Do they understand our role in their classroom? Do we understand their goals for their students? And we could do that with our students as well. I'm a big proponent, and all my kids knew what their goals were. So how are those, their understanding of why they're with me? And again, if my students don't know what we're working on and why, then that goes back to me. Am I clear? Am I clear? Do I know why I'm seeing you? Sometimes I know in the beginning I definitely didn't.
I love that. Get the kid. Yeah, I think the kids, they have the right to know why they're being pulled from their peers, or either in the classroom or being pulled to your room, to know why, so they can have the words. Especially that helps that relationship between you and the parent when the student knows, because kids go home and go, oh, I did nothing. Oh, I don't
Exactly.
go to
We
speech. I
play
don't go to
games.
speech. I don't go to speech. And they're like, wait, what? And they're like, what do you mean? And then you get that call. You haven't been seeing my child for speech.
Well, my kids, I would always ask them, especially for move-ins, like, who's your speech teacher? What did you do? And a lot of times they would say, we played games. They didn't really know what they did. And I
Yeah,
know that the speech therapist was working on specific goals with them for sure.
absolutely. And so I think that the clarity, I think, is what you're really kind of hitting us with, is everyone needs to have the clarity. So we need to be clear on what our role is, and the staff, the school staff needs to have an understanding, so they have clarity of what exactly our role is. We're not the gateway to all special ed. And we need to, then our parents need to have clarity on what speech therapy is in the school setting. And I liked how you said, yeah, we have the same skills, the same education. A lot of us that work in the schools also work in the medical and clinics. We have all that skill set. We're not saying we can't I personally can't do that because I'm a school speech path. We're not saying that. We're all superstars. But what we're saying is that what we need to be doing in the schools is different than what is being done outside in
Well, I'm
private.
beholden to the educational law. A clinical
Beholden
based
to
is
the
beholden to the
education.
medical model. I'm beholden to the educational model. I operate under an educational system. And so how I frame who I see is filtered through that system, unlike a medical model. And that's how I will deal with like an outside eval with an IEE, independent ed
Okay.
eval that's come in and the SLP was a medical. And sometimes, unfortunately, they'll prescribe what I'm supposed to do.
Yes.
And so I always will say, that's great clinical information for me. I'm going to filter that through how they're performing in the classroom now. So I need to get some more information because that's only one piece of information from this outside therapist. Now I have to say, is there a educational impact? Is it impacting their progress in the classroom? I need to collect some data for that, and then we can have a conversation. And Carolyn, I just realized that my plug is broken and
Yeah.
my computer is dying.
Oh,
Can I
no.
run and get a different plug because it's telling me it's not charging?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We
I'm
will.
so
No
sorry.
worries. No
I'll be
worries.
right back.
Okay. I think what I just heard her say and makes me think about dynamic assessment and what is really special about being a speech path in the school setting is that we get to see them in other settings besides just in the clinic, that one hour only, and having that clarity with the parent that our testing is different. What they saw in the clinic is very different than what we can see in the classroom. And I think most of us in I hope I'm unanimous in this, that we are all being charged to do the impact statements in our IEPs. I'm hoping that those that are listening, that yes, we're all having to do impact statements, because I think that is so powerful when we can do, yeah, okay, thanks, Beatrice, that yes, impact statements is what we're being charged to do now, to really, we prove that there is oh, good. Thank you, Lori. Oh, yes. While you were gone, I was just talking about how we do dynamic assessments. We're not just doing one standard assessment in the clinic. We're really seeing them in different settings within the school and how
Yeah.
important it is for the impact. So that's kind of what I was doing while you were doing that. Thanks,
Yeah, I did hear you talk about dynamic assessment, which I love to see, if I'm teaching the child this skill, how quickly do they pick it up? Sometimes that helps me also inform whether or not I feel like they need my skill or they don't actually need my skill.
right.
Because if I teach it to them and then they can tell me a narrative because I just gave them a simple story structure, maybe they just haven't learned it. Maybe they don't actually need my skills and be missing class to learn that skill. So I think dynamic assessment is really helpful. But I think a lot of times we do, I'm not trying to minimize the load that a lot of SLPs carry. I do it too. Like I have a lot of evals to do. I know it's hard, but I also believe that there are simple systems we can put in place to find out from the teacher what they're seeing so that we have that classroom piece is so critical and critically important for a school-based SLP, because if I don't know how they're doing in the classroom, how do I know if what I'm finding is related to what's happening?
Absolutely. And when you said like you teach, then test and read, or
Yeah,
test, but I'm sorry, I'm getting that all mixed up. And if they haven't learned it yet, does that make sense to take them out of the environment of learning? Or if they haven't been exposed to something, is that a deficit? Even though it's going to
exactly.
show up on a standardized test of a deficit, but how much have they had the education? Yeah.
Exactly. I don't want to call something, I'm very hesitant to call something a disability that might be a difference. I never want to label a child as having a disability if I think it could be something different. And so, I love to use, like someone had mentioned, the RTI model and what that is. Like, I really enjoy seeing students within the intervention model because that gives me a lot of information about how well they can learn something. And if they can pick it up quickly, they probably don't have the disability. I know those kids that take forever for me to even, for them to even understand how to differentiate WH questions and the difference between the character and the setting and the story. Those can be really hard for my students with, DLD. Whereas I have these other students where there's concern, they pick it up really quickly and I can kind of parse out, oh, this looks like an attention issue or something else that's not necessarily my realm. I think one other thing I'd love to say is just that, it's great that we have this huge scope of practice. And sometimes I think as SLPs, we get frustrated because it seems like our scope of practice keeps growing. There's so many things we can do with the skill set that we have. It just doesn't mean we have to. Just because it's in our scope of practice doesn't mean it's our responsibility to work on.
Yes. I think we're all going, yeah, raise the roof on that one, because it is true. I think as speech, we are superheroes. We have superpowers and we can do it. And yes, we are the gurus of communication, but is that it's not our responsibility to take over the roles of everyone in the school.
Yes.
Even though we could do it better.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh gosh, this has been fantastic. Are there do you want to takeaways, any last things you want to make sure that we've gone over everything you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, I think I just want to say thank you for what you do. Speech language pathologists are so important in the school setting. I love the public school. I love being an SLP. I think our roles are so, so important and a lot of times under recognized because people don't really understand our training and what we can bring to the school setting. And I just want to empower those who are doing the work, find joy in their work that they are doing. And so I would love to connect with people. Is it okay if I share? Like, you can find me on YouTube.
I was going to ask if we could, let's do a shout out of how people can connect with you.
Yeah, right now I'm on YouTube. So if you just search my name, Dr. Laura Mansfield, I should pop right up. I do have a free download at thejoyfulslp.com/qualify. So it's a qualifying guide and it kind of outlines some of the things we talked about today, the difference between the educational and medical model and the 3-1 model, things like that. So if people would like that resource, they can go to that
Did you say
URL.
Dr. Joy SLP?
So the website is thejoyfulslp.com.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Thejoyfulslp.com/qualify. We'll get you that. And then if you want to find me on YouTube, it's best to just search my name, Dr. Laura Mansfield.
Let me see. I just popped that in the chat. Did I do that right?
Yeah. And if anyone wanted to connect, you can email me at laura@thejoyfulslp.com.
Let me get that in that. Laura at thejoyfulslp.
Yep. .com.
I'd
love to get any feedback you have for me.
Wait, Laura at thejoyfulslp.com. Got it. Boom. All right.
Thank you, Carolyn.
No, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. A huge thank you, Dr. Laura. You are wonderful. I hope to have you back. I want to say thanks to everybody. Bye, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast. Remember to go to speechtherapypd.com to learn more about earning ASHA CEUs. We appreciate your positive reviews and support and would love for you to write a quick review and subscribe. If you have indicated that you are part of the ASHA registry and entered both your ASHA number and a complete address in your account profile prior to the course completion, we will submit earned CEUs to ASHA. Please allow 1 to 2 months from the completion date for your CEUs to be reflected on your ASHA transcript. For our School of Speech listeners, we have a special coupon code to receive $20 off any annual subscription to speechtherapypd.com. Head over there to get ASHA CEUs for listening to this podcast and all other episodes. The code is SCHOOL20. That is SCHOOL20. Hope to see you on our next episode. Also, please don't hesitate to tell us which topics you would like us to cover in future episodes. To get in touch, drop us a line in the comment section or send us a message on social media.